mission house at Tojak stands forlornly on a windswept Alaskan split, while huddled around in a swarm of dirt-covered igloos grovel in an ecstasy of abasement. Many natives crawled around all of these and stared across the bay as down its gully came an Arctic caravan, men and dogs, black against the deadly witness. Ahead swung the guide, straining awkwardly on his 5-foot webs, while the stranding pack of pattered at his heels. Big George, the driver, urged them with strong words, idioms of the northern land, and his strong whip but sharply at their legs. His companion, clinging to the sled, stumbled now and then, while his face, splitting from the snap of the frost, was smothered in a muffler's. Sometimes he fell, plunged into the snow, rising painfully and groaning with the misery of snow blindness. Most there now. Cap, keep up your grit. I'm all right, answered the afflicted man, wearily. Don't mind me. George, too, had suffered from a sheen of unbroken witness, and while his eyes have not woolly closed, he saw but dimly his cheeks were grease-smeared and blackened by the charred wood to break the snow glare, but through his mask showed the signs of suffering, while his bloodshot eyes, dripping scalding tears, and throbbed distressfully. For days he had not dared to lose sight of the guide. Once he had caught him sneaking the dogs away and feared he had licked the man for a time. Now Jaska broke trailhead, his sullen, swollen features baleful in their injury. Down the steep bank they slid across the humped up sea ice at the river mouth and into the village. At the greeting of their guide to his tribesmen, George started. 12 years of coast life had taught him the dialect from Point Barrow south, where he glanced at Captain to find whether he too had heard the message. As Jaska handed a talisman to the chief, he strode to him and snatched it. Oh, it's Father Orloff, is it? To him, he gazed at the token, a white spruce chipped with strange marks and carvings. What does it mean, George? Said the blind man. It's a long story, Charlie, in black. You shouldn't have known it before we started. I'm a marked man in the coast country. It's Orloff's work, the renegade. Father, he calls himself. Father to these devils he rules and robs for himself in the name of church. His hate is bitter, and he'd have my life if these watery-livered curs didn't dread the sound of my voice. God help him when we meet. He shook hairy claws in at the hostile circle, then cried to the chief in the native tongue. Oh, Shamam, we come bleeding and weary. Hungry grips us and our bones are stiff with frost. The light is gone from my brother's eyes and we are sick. Open you the door to the mission house, that is, the Minox may rest and grow strong. The Indians clustered before the portal with its rude cross above and started manglingly while the chief spoke. At the name of his enemy, the sightly eyes of George gleamed and growled contemptuously. Advancing among them, they scattered at the manner of his coming and struck the padlocked door till it rattled stiffly. Then, spying the cross overhead, he lifted up and gripped the woods. It came away ripping and with wails of rage and horror at the sacrilege. They closed about him. "Here, Cap, buster in quick." He dragged the captain before the entrance, thrusting the weapon upon him, then ran fiercely among the people. He snatched them to him, cuffing it like a bear, and trampling them into the snow. Those who came into the reach of his knotty arms crumpled up and twisted under his feet. He whirled into the group, roaring hoarsely, his anger, grease-blackened face hideous with rage. The aubergine is not a fighting machine. For him the side-step encounter have no being. They melted ahead of his blazing wrath, and he whisked them fling by their garments, so that they felt the stamp of his moccasined heels. Captain dragged the team within, and George followed, blocked the shattered door. "We're safe as long as we stay in the church," he said. "Right, a sanctuary, eh? Does it occur to you how we're going to get out?" "Never mind, we'll get out somehow," he said. And that night, as Charlie, Captain, late university man, and his engineer lay with eyes swatched in streaming clothes, spoke apparently and with bitterness of great wrong. It happened when we rocked the bars of 40 Mile before even a Chechacho had crossed the Chilkoot. I went over to the headwaters of the Tanana, into the big valley. I went and got lost in the flats. 'Tis a wild country, rimmed by high mountains, with a large tundra, with the river winding clean back to the source of the Cooper. I run out of grub. We always did them days and built a raft to float down to the Yukon. A race with starvation and a dead heat and near proved to, though I had shade the best of it. I drifted out in the main river, raving mad. My muclucs eat off, and my moose hide gun covers inside of me. A girl spied me from the village, and 'twas her brought me ashore. In her birch bark, and tended me in her wick eye up till the reason came and the blood ran through me. I nine seen a white man standing around at times, and hearing him beg her to leave me to the old squaws. She didn't, though. She gave me bits of moose and meat and berries and dried salmon. And when I come to one day, I saw she was a little and brown and pleading, and her clothes all covered with beads. Her eyes was big and sad, and dimples poked her cheeks when she laughed. 'Twas then the Orloff takes his hand. The white man, a priest he called himself, breed Russian, maybe he was, but a blacker-hearted thief, but never wronged a child. He wanted the girl, Maltha, and so did I. When I asked her old man for her, he said she was promised to the Russian. I laughed at him. And the chief hates to be mocked. You know what sway the church has over these Indians. Well, Orlov is a strong man. He held them like a rock. You work on them until one day the tribe man came to me in a body and said, "Go, give me the girl, and I will." Says I. Orlov sneered. She was mine for a month before you came. Says he do with a fine, showing back his eyes. Do you want her now? For a minute I believed him. I struck once to kill, and he went down, and they closed on me but a fast as I shook him off. 'Twas a beautiful sight for ruction on the high banks over the river, but I was like water from the sickness. I fought to get at the priest where he lay, to stamp out his grinning face before they drowned me, but I was beaten back to the bluff, and I battled with my heels over the edge. I broke a pole from the fish rack, and good money went down. Then I heard Medela howling softly from below. "Jump," she said. "Big one, jump." She had loosed a canoe at the landing and now held it in the boiling current underneath, paddling desperately. As they ran out of their tents with their rifles, I leaped. A long drop in cold water, but I hit feet first. When I rose, the girl was alongside. It's a ticklish thing to crawl over the stern of a canoe. And the spluttering of stags with the roar of a muzzle loaders above it, shaken to the nerves, but the maid never flinched. Not even when a bullet split the gunwale. She ripped a piece of her dress and plugged a hole under the waterline while I paddled out of range. The next winter at Holy Cross, she ran to me shaking one day. He is here, oh big man, I am afraid." "Who's here?" I said. "He is here, Father Olaf." And his eyes was round and scared, so I took off and kissed her while she clung to me. She was such a little girl. He spoke to me at the water hole. "I have come for you." I ran very fast, but he came behind. "Where's George?" he said. I went out of the cabin, down to the mission, and into the house of the Father Barnum, and he was there. "Orlov, what do you do? What do you want?" I said. Father Barnum speaks up. "He knows for a good man that the length of the river, George," he said. "Father Olaf tells me you stole the girl Medela from her tribe. It's a shameful thing for a white to take a red girl for his wife, but it's a crime to live as you do." "What?" I asked. "We can't sell you provisions nor allow you to stay in a village." Orlov grins. "You must go," he says, "or give up." "Nor I'll do neither." And I show the paper from the missionary at the Nuledo Satan that we are married. "She's my wife," I said, "and too good for me. She's left her people and her goods, and I'll care for her." I saw how it hurt Orlov, and I laid my hand on his shoulder close to the neck. "I distress ye, and sure as fate you'll die the shocking death if ever harm comes to the little one." That was the winter of the famine. Through every winter was the same then, and I went to Anvik for grub, took all the strong men and dogs to the village. I was afraid when I left too, for it was the time I should have been with her, but there was no one else to go to. When you come back, she said, there will be another little boy, and he will grow mighty and strong, just like his father. She hung her arms round me, Cap, and I left with her kisses warm on my lip. It was a terrible trip. The river wet with overflows, and the cut-offs drifted deep, so I drove back into the Holy Cross a week late with bleeding dogs and frozen Indian stranded at the sled's ropes. I heard the wail of an old woman before I come to the cabin, and when Metla and had sobbed the story out in her weakness, I went back into the dark and down to the mission. I remember how the northern lights flared over the hills above, and the little spruces on their summit looked to me like headstones, black against the moon, and I laughed when I saw the snow red in the night glare, for it meant blood and death. It was a lusty babe, and it as ever crowded up, but Orloff had come to the sick bed and sent her squaws away. Baptism and such things, he said he'd do. The little fellow died that night. They say the mission door was locked and barred, but I pushed through it like paper and came into Father Barnum's house, where they sat 50 below his bed for the naked flesh. I broke in, bareheaded, mittenless, and I froze some on the way down. He saw murder in his eyes and tried to run, but I got him as he went out of my room. He tore his throat loose from my stiffened fingers and went into the church, but I beat down the door with my naked fist, mocking at his prayers inside, and may I never be closer to death than Orloff was that night. Then a squaw tugged at my parka. She is dying. Cut and Jack, she said, and I ran back up the hill with a cold biting at my heart. There is no death at the night of the Holy Cross, though God knows one naked soul was due to walk out onto the snow. At daylight, when I came back for him, he had fled down the river with the fastest dogs, and to this day I've never seen his face, though it is often I've felt his hate. He's grown into the strongest missionary on the coast, and he never lets a chance go by to harry me or the girl. Do you mind with the Sagway Bennett died this week? We was pardons up the Norton Sound way when he was killed, though they thought it was suicide, but I know I found the caribou belt in the brush near camp, the kind they make at the Cushingcoin, Father Orion's country. His men took the wrong one, that's all. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you this, Cap, but before we started, for now, we're into the South Country, where he owns the natives. He knows we've come as the blood token of the guide showed. He wants my life, and there's great trouble coming up. I'm hoping you'll soon get your sight for By now there was a runner 20 miles into the hills with news that were blind in the church at Tajik. 3 days he'll be going, and for the 5th, you'll hear the jingle of Russian dog bells. He'll kill the fastest team in Nishigak in the coming, and God help us if we're here. George scraped a bit of frost lace from the toned window pane. Dark figures moved over the snow, circling the chapel, and he knew that each was armed. Only the reverence for the church held them from doing a task set by the Orloff, and he sighed as he changed the bandages on his suffering mate. They woke the next morning to the moan of winds and the sift of snow clouds past the walls. Staring through his peephole, George distinguished only a seethe of whirling flakes that grayed the view, bloating even the neighborhood huts, and when even the early brought a rising note in the storm, the trouble lifted from his face. A 3-day blizzard, he rejoiced, and the strongest team on the coast can't wallow through it under a week. These onshore gales is buttes. For 3 days, the wind tore from off the sea into the open bight as the Hoosehead lays. Kojak and his violence wrecked the armor of shore ice into the bay till it beat and roared against the split, threshing maelstrom of shattered bergs. The waters piled into the inlet driven by the lash of storms till they overflowed the river ice behind the village, submerging and breaking it into ragged, dangerous confusion. On the 3rd day, with Arctic vagary, the wind gasped reluctantly and scurried over the range. In its wake, the surging ocean churned loudly, and the backwater behind the town, held by the dam of freezing slush ice at the river mouth, was skimmed by a thin ice paper pierced here and there by up-ending piles from beneath. This held the night snow, so that morning showed the village girt on 3 sides by the stream, soft-carpeted and safe to the eye, but falling beneath the feet of child. Your eyes are coming along mighty slow, worried George. I'm hoping his reverence is up to his gills and drifts back yonder. We must leave him sled trail for a souvenir. How can we with the place guarded? Hitch the dogs and run for it by night. Who'll burn us out when he comes? Find targets we'd make on the snow by the lights of a burning shack. If you can't see to shoot, we'll go tonight. Hello? What's that? Outside came the howl of a mammoths and the cry of men leaping to the window. George rumbled in free and stared into the sunshine. Too late, he said. Here's he come. It's time I killed it. He spoke gratiently with the dulled anger of years. On the bright surface of the opposite hillside, a sled bearing a muffled figure appeared and silhouetted against the glisten of the crust. Its team, maddened by the village scent, poured down the incline towards the river bank, and the guide swung onto the runners behind. While the voice of the people rose to their priest in a whirl of soft snow, they drove down to the treachery of ice, the screams of natives. Fierce the pack as they ride it out on the bending sheet, while a long sledge, borne by its momentum, shot forward till its splitting cry on the ice sounded over the laminations. It slackened, sagged, and disappeared in a surge of congealing waters. The whale dogs were dragged in the opening, and their mates ahead of jerked back onto them in a fighting tangle, all settled into the swirl. Orlov leaped from the seeking sled, but hindered by his fur, swaddling crashed through his lunged heavy in his struggles to mount the edge of the field. As he floundered down onto the cave's surface, it let him back on, and the waters covered him time and time again. And for the first time, they saw his eyes bound tightly with bandages. He strove to loosen. My God, he's snowblind, cried George. In a moment, he appeared among the frantic mob fringing the shore. The guide broke his way towards a hummock of old ice, forming an islet nearby, and the priest half swam, half scrambled behind, till they crawled out upon this solid footing. Here's the wintry wind searched them, and their dripping clothes stiffened quickly. Orlov dragged the strips from his face, and the sun glitter pierced his eyes were writhed through, seared by the naked touch of a hot steel. He shouted frighteningly in his blindness, but the mocking voice of Big George answered him, and cowered at the malevolence in the words. Here I am, Orlov. It's help you want, is it? I'll shoot the man, and that tries to reach you. Ha, ha, ha. You're freezing, eh? George will talk you keep awake. A dirty trick of the river to cheat me, so I fattened for years of hope of stamping your life out, and now it's robbed me. But I'll stick till you're safe in hell. The man cried piteously, turning his bleared eyes towards the sound. Shoot. Why don't ya? And end it, can it? You see, we're freezing. He stood up and compares of stiffened clothes, shivering palpably. The truest thing you ever said, cried George, and he swung to his Colts. The view, I'll favor you, and I'll keep my vow. He raised the gun, and splashing in the distant dog broke the silence. A native knelt stiffly. George, George! Captain had stumbled down among them and plucked at his arm, peering dimly into his distorted face. Great God, are you a martyr? They'll be dead before we can save them. Save them? Said George, while reason fought with his mania. Who's gonna save him? He needs killing. I'm hungry for his life. He's a man, George. They're both human, and they're dying in sight of us. Give them a chance. Fight like a man. As he spoke, the furry fell away from the whaler and became the alert, strong man of the frontier, knowing the quick danger and meeting it. He bellowed at the natives and fled backwards, before his voice storming at the cache where lay the big canoes. They slid one down. Seizing paddles, crushed the ice around and still floated. Then they, supported by the prow, George stamped the ice into fragments ahead and forced the race slowly along the channels he made. At the shore, they bore the priest to their shelter while the guide was snatched into a nearby hut. They hacked off his brittle clothes and supported him on the bed as he walked. His feet clattered on the board floor like the sound of wooden shoes. They were white and solid, as were his hands. "He's badly frozen," whispered Captain. "Can we save him?" They rubbed and thawed for hours, but the sluggish blood refused to flow into the extremities, and Captain felt that this man would die of lack of ambulation. Though the Russian was silent, gazing strangely at George. "'Tis no use," finally said the big man, despairingly. "I've seen too many of them. We've done our best." He disappeared and sounded the jingle of harness as the dogs were hitched. As he entered for the camp outfit, Orlov spoke. "George Brace, I've harmed you bitterly these many years, and you're a good man to help me so. It's no use. We've both fought the cold death, and now know when to quit. I came here to kill you, but as you will go across the mountains free, while I rave in the madness and the medicine men make charges over me. When you come into the Bethel mission, I'll be dead. Goodbye." 5 days later, a broken team crawled over in the snow to the Morven mission, urged by 2 men gaunt from the trail and blistered by the cold. From the sledge came shrieks and throaty mutterings, horrid gabblings of post-freezing madness, and Dr. Forrest, lifting back the robe, found Orlov lashed into his couch. 5 days from Tojek, 200 miles in heavy trails, explained George wearily, the cries of manic dimmed behind the log walls. 2 hours later, Forrest spoke gravely as they nursed his frostbites in his room. "We have operated. He will recover. It's a sad day, murmured George. We'll just take the taste out of everything. For me. He's a cripple now, eh?" "Yes, helpless. I did not know Father Orlov had many friends hereabout," continued the doctor. "He was thought to be hated by the whites. I'm glad the reporting was wrong." "Friends be damned," said the other strongly. "What friends?" "I can't get them any place, but where can you find another entity like that man?"